To wrap up the year, I wanted to do something a little bit different and make a video of the 15 best American skylines, but with a twist, as voted on by you, the viewers of this channel. So after 10,000 votes and hundreds of comments, I was able to narrow it down through a very unscientific method to a top 15. I really appreciate all the support in the form of poll responses. It was super fascinating to see all the competing opinions and thoughts. And I also would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to Building Tales. 2025 was a lot of fun, and I fully expect to ramp things up further in 2026. So without further ado, here's the top 15. First off, we have one of my favorites on the list, Detroit. After decades of being beaten down and seemingly having nothing going in its favor, it's finally starting to turn around. The city's seen two main skyscraper booms in its history, the first in the 1920s and the other in the 1970s. And as many of these once spectacular towers are now being renovated once again, the skyline is increasingly beginning to shine. With 8 towers over 500 feet and close to 40 over 300 feet, it has some pretty significant height to go along with its uniqueness and its history. There is a chance, though, that the skyline could look significantly different in coming years, as there's been some talk of demolishing some of the iconic buildings at Renaissance Center, but we shall see how that all works out. Next up at number 14, we have Houston, Texas, a skyline that's actually among the tallest in the country, with 150 buildings over 300 feet, 40 over 500 feet, and 12 over 700 feet. It has impressive height and covers quite a bit of ground. It actually covers so much ground it has 3 distinct skylines, downtown, uptown, and medical center. So this may be why it didn't rank quite as high according to you all compared to some other cities, because it's cool that there's 3 unique skylines, but it also spreads things out quite a bit and breaks up the skyline. So what do you think? Did this one deserve to be higher on the list because of its size, or did it end up where it should have? On to number 13, we have Atlanta. A little bit smaller than Houston, but it still has pretty impressive height with 124 buildings over 300 feet, 17 over 500 feet. Interestingly, in Atlanta, almost all the high-rise buildings were built in 1960 or later, so the skyline has a much more modern feel than many of the cities on this list that have significantly older buildings. Atlanta also has the tallest building to appear on this list so far, the Bank of America Plaza at 1,023 feet, the tallest building in the southern U.S. and tallest building in any state capital. On to number 12, we're staying in the southern U.S. with Charlotte, North Carolina. This one has seen quite a bit of growth in recent years, but still lags far behind Houston and Atlanta in terms of overall size and total height. It has 40 buildings over 300 feet and 8 over 500 feet. But what it lacks in overall size, it more than makes up for in creativity. A number of the buildings are really one of a kind, and the creative lighting that they have going on at night makes for one of the most impressive nighttime skylines in the country. At number 11, we're headed across the country to the northern part with Minneapolis. Minneapolis is another one that overperformed relative to its size. It has 41 buildings over 300 feet and 10 over 500 feet. But like Charlotte, it's other things about it that make it top 15 worthy, according to you all. Unlike places like Houston and Atlanta that have multiple skylines, Minneapolis' downtown core is pretty condensed into one spot, which makes it particularly aesthetic. Its location on the Mississippi River with its historic bridges in the foreground is really the icing on the cake. Now on to number 10, and I feel like this next one made the list for one reason and one reason alone. Coming in at number 10, we have St. Louis. The arch makes the skyline completely distinctive and justifies the ranking in the top 10. The rest of the skyline is just okay, but lacking compared to most on this list. With just 15 buildings over 300 feet and only 3 over 500 feet, it's one of the shortest to make this list. But it does have the arch going for it, which is something that no other city will ever be able to match. It also has a relatively old skyline, which makes it more interesting than its size alone would indicate. At number 9, we have one of the fastest growing skylines in the country, also one that turned out to be particularly divisive when I was doing the polls, and that would be Miami. Some people were adamantly rooting for it to end up in the top 5, but other people felt it should be even lower on the list than it ended up. Just 30 years ago, there was less than 5 buildings over 500 feet in Miami. Today, there's 70, with 6 of these standing over 700 feet. The modern flair of the buildings is definitely where the debate is. Some people love the blue glass and the unusual designs, while other people are not fond of it at all. Either way, its boom over the last several decades was good enough to get it into the top 10 according to you all. At number 8, we have another one that was surprisingly controversial. Los Angeles has a fairly large skyline, but it's somewhat spread out, leading to a lot of people thinking that it's underwhelming for a city the size of LA. With that said, it still has 31 buildings over 500 feet and almost 110 over 300 feet. It also has 3 massive towers currently in limbo. Towers at Oceanwide Plaza got started a decade ago but haven't been finished. All 3 towers are over 500 feet, with one clocking in at almost 700 feet, but they all remain unfinished. At number 7, we have Boston, Massachusetts. While there's a handful of large towers away from the downtown core, the downtown core is one of the more dense ones on this list, and when coupled with the water surrounding it, it makes for a very picturesque skyline. Its 73 buildings over 300 feet and 23 buildings over 500 feet are impressive, particularly considering, once again, how tightly they're packed in there. Interestingly, Boston's tallest building, and maybe its most famous, the John Hancock Tower, is one of the ones that is away from the downtown area. It's also had some of the most problems of any tower in the city. Shortly after it was built, the windows started falling out and smashing onto the street below. After an extensive renovation project, which included replacing all of the almost brand new windows, the building has stood strong ever since. Now we're headed to the Pacific Northwest for number 6 with the Seattle skyline. The 53 buildings over 300 feet, 21 buildings over 500 feet, and 5 buildings over 700 feet is certainly respectable, but the thing that likely bumped Seattle this far up on the list was its uniqueness. Set against the backdrop of one of the most stunning mountain peaks in the U.S., Mount Rainier, the skyline also has some truly one-of-a-kind buildings, like the Space Needle and the 110-year-old Smith Tower, which is arguably the oldest tower of its size on the West Coast. We're now down into the top 5 cities as voted by you, the viewers of this channel. So for number 5, we have San Francisco. Like Seattle before it, the San Francisco skyline combines its impressive size with some spectacular and unusual surroundings. The Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz definitely add some one-of-a-kind flair. On the building side, the city shines as well, with 124 buildings over 300 feet, 26 over 500 feet, and 4 over 700 feet. The Transamerica Pyramid is the most recognizable skyscraper in the skyline, although it ranks second in height to the 1,070-foot tall Salesforce Tower. For number 4, if I was being totally honest, I would have ranked this one further down the list, but according to you all, it beat San Francisco by a significant margin and Seattle by an even greater margin. And that would be Philadelphia. On an overall numbers basis, it's a little bit smaller than San Francisco, with only 86 buildings over 300 feet, 18 over 500 feet, and 4 over 700 feet. Although, to be fair, all 4 of the ones that fall into the over 700 feet category are right around 1,000 feet, so the skyline does have a fairly impressive peak to it. People who were rooting for Philadelphia pointed to its density of its downtown and its impressive roster of historical buildings, which pushed it up to the number 4 spot in their opinion. And they do have a point. 18 of Philly's buildings over 300 feet tall were built in the first half of the 1900s, which adds significant variety to the skyline. It's not just a bunch of blue glass towers. None of these towers are more notable in Philadelphia than the 548-foot City Hall building that was built in 1901. Now, before I get into the top 3, I want to give a few shout-outs, some honorable mentions that got a lot of love in the comments section but fell short when they were added to the polls. Baltimore, Jersey City, Dallas, Honolulu, Vegas, Nashville, and Kansas City got quite a few comments in support of them, but didn't quite make it when it came time to vote. Now we're into the top 3. At number 3, we have a city that punched way above its weight, and that would be Pittsburgh. The city of only 300,000 people has just 34 buildings over 300 feet and 6 over 500 feet, making it the second smallest on this list, second to only St. Louis. But its location at the confluence of the Ohio, Allegheny, and Monongahela rivers, along with its mountain ridges that flank downtown, were enough to earn it the number 3 spot. Also, the fact that this channel is disproportionately watched by people in Pittsburgh may have had something to do with it, but I'm here for it. Of all the cities that I've been to, Pittsburgh skyline is one of the few that truly stands out in a way that others don't. You can take cities like Houston, Charlotte, Minneapolis, Atlanta. They all have big, impressive skylines and tall buildings, but when you line them up one next to the other, the only people that could really tell them apart are skyscraper enthusiasts. But you show someone Pittsburgh, and they almost certainly will recognize it. Whether it's from the famous yellow bridges over the rivers, the inclines running up the ridges adjacent to downtown, or maybe it's the former U.S. Steel building downtown. A lot of people will recognize it, a lot more than some of the other bigger cities on this list. Now we're up to number 2. There was actually a pretty big push to make Chicago number 1 in the comments section, but ultimately it came in second when it came time to vote. It's nowhere near the size of New York, but to those who were rooting for Chicago over New York, they pointed to the spectacular architecture, the mix of styles, and its picturesque location along the river and Lake Michigan. And it does have pretty impressive size, unmatched by any other on this list besides New York. It has 400 buildings over 300 feet, 70 over 500 feet, and 6 over 1,000 feet. So, outside of New York, its size is unmatched. And on to number 1, you really didn't need to watch this video to know what was coming here. It's the classic American skyline. Some would argue that it's among the best in the world. It has 1,000 buildings over 300 feet, more than 300 over 500 feet, and 20 buildings over 1,000 feet. But it's not just tall and expansive. It also has some of the most well-known and historic buildings of all time, including the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building. There has been a little bit of controversy lately surrounding the building of some of the super slim towers. Some people are not fans, and on this poll, some were even campaigning for New York to lose the number 1 spot due to the perceived damage that these new buildings have done to the skyline. But ultimately, New York won in a landslide. So that's the list. How did Building Tales Nation do? Is the list spot on or is it way off? Which cities were the biggest snubs from the list and which ones made the list but didn't really deserve to make it? Let me know what you think, and also let me know what cities you're interested in seeing more of in 2026. Thanks for watching, and have a good new year.